Hello friends. About 70% of the friends who watch my videos are not subscribed, and I would be very happy if you did. Also, don't forget to press the like button and leave your comments. Your interaction makes the content reach everyone and contributes to the growth of the channel. Thank you all. From which country or city do you follow the channel? Some nights, I wake up to the sound of a loudspeaker echoing inside my skull. Marco, return to the lab now. Even though I quit that job 6 years ago. Even though that hospital has been shut down for years. I used to be the night shift guard at Hospital St. Anne, a place people whispered about as the back door to memory. It once treated Canadian war veterans, but behind those moldy walls were decades of cover-ups, hundreds of patients with erased identities and screams that were sealed beneath a basement with no exit. I didn't believe in ghosts. I was a practical man. The only things I feared were unpaid bills and a 12-hour shift without coffee. But just 1 week on the job, and I started to question whether the footsteps I heard every night were really just echoes in my mind. And when you see your own reflection waving at you in the mirror while you stand completely still, you'll start to understand some places were never meant to be guarded. Some memories were never meant to be woken up. If you're listening to this, remember just one thing. Never break the rules. Even when you think you're alone. When I first got the call about the job, I was sitting in my one-bedroom apartment staring at an empty fridge and an overdue electricity bill. Night shift security at an abandoned psychiatric hospital, double pay for isolation. I didn't hesitate. I packed a bag and signed the contract the next day. They called it Hospital St. Anne. No one used the full name anymore. Just the facility, or sometimes that place past the train tracks, like it was something they didn't want to define too clearly. It had been shut down since the early 2000s, after decades of treating veteran schizophrenics, and those society quietly wished would disappear. My first impression? Silence. Not peaceful silence, the wrong kind. The kind that presses on your chest like the air's too thick. The building stood like a corpse in concrete, 4 stories of decaying brick, shattered windows boarded shut, and rust bleeding down its gutters. The security office was tucked in a side annex with an old metal door that groaned when it opened, almost like it didn't want me there. Inside, the floor was dust-coated, but someone had wiped a narrow path through it just wide enough for footsteps. I wasn't the first, but I felt very much alone. The site manager, a man named Harold, gave me a key ring the size of a dinner plate and a crumpled printed sheet. "You'll want to follow these," he said, not looking me in the eye. It was titled, Guidelines for Night Security, St. Anne. And just beneath it, written in red pen, these are not suggestions. Some of the rules were strange. Do not speak to anyone you see in the West Wing past midnight. Avoid looking into any mirror between 200 and 3 a.m. If the intercom turns on by itself, unplug it immediately. I thought it was a joke. A leftover from Halloween. I laughed. Harold didn't. "Listen, kid," he said. "I've been in this job long enough to know what I know, and what I shouldn't try to explain. Just follow the damn rules." That night, my shift began at 9:00 p.m. By 10:15, the lights on the 3rd floor flickered off, even though the power system had just been inspected. At 11:06, the elevator moved. I checked the monitor. It was going from floor 1 to 4, and back down again. No one was inside. At 11:30, I walked past a mirror by the old ICU wing. I didn't look into it, not because I believed the rules, but because I suddenly felt like something on the other side wanted me to. And at midnight sharp, I heard footsteps coming down the corridor, slow dragging. When I turned the corner, there was no one, but the floor was wet, and there were footprints, bare, human, leading back toward the West Wing. I stared into the dark corridor, and something deep in my gut whispered, "You shouldn't have come here." I found the rule sheet on my second night, and I wish I hadn't. It was around 1:20 a.m. I was walking through the admin hallway behind the security office when I noticed a door slightly ajar. It led into what looked like a forgotten staff break room, old microwave flipped chairs, a coffee machine covered in cobwebs. And then I saw it. A large sheet of yellowed paper nailed to the wall near the old corkboard. Not pinned, nailed with 2 rusted iron tacks, and what looked unmistakably like a dark red smear underneath the top left corner. The handwriting was jagged, uneven, as if written by someone in pain or panic, barely able to keep their hand steady. The title read, Regulations for Night Survival, Hospital St. Anne. Underneath were 7 rules, not printed, not typed, scrawled, almost carved into the paper with something sharp. 1. Begin your rounds at exactly 9:00 p.m. Not before, not after. The building notices if you're early, and something else notices if you're late. 2. Do not go to the 4th floor. Ever. Even if you hear voices. Especially if they sound like someone you know. 3. Never look into any mirror after 2:13 a.m. Your reflection is not always you. 4. If you hear the intercom turn on by itself, do not listen. Unplug it immediately. It is not a broadcast. It is an invitation. 5. If the elevator arrives on its own, do not approach it. Do not enter. Do not look inside. Someone is already in there, and they're waiting for you to notice. 6. You will hear crying from room 217. Do not investigate. No one is in that room. There hasn't been for 53 years. 7. If your own name is called over the loudspeaker after 3:00 a.m., leave. Do not return. You were never supposed to hear it. I stood there staring at the paper, heart-pounding ears, straining for any sound behind me. The air in the room felt thicker, colder, like something had noticed me reading. I took a photo with my phone, but when I checked the gallery, the image was just static, like an old, broken television screen. I reached out to touch the corner of the sheet, and I swear to God the blood was still tacky. Fresh somehow after all these years. That night I tried to follow the rules. I really did. But the elevator still moved on its own. The intercom buzzed once at 2:45, and at exactly 3:06 a.m. the voice that came through the speaker was my own. It said, "Marco, return to room 217. We're ready to begin again." I hadn't told anyone my name. Rule number 3 was clear: never look into any mirror after 2:13 a.m. That night, it was 2:17 a.m. when I broke it. I didn't mean to. I wasn't being brave or curious. I was just tired, exhausted from pacing halls where the air always felt heavier than it should. My flashlight was dying, and the flickering hospital lights did more harm than help. Everything was bathed in this cold, sickly pale green. I turned the corner near the old ICU ward, heading toward the supply lockers, when I passed a tall mirror bolted to the wall. I'd seen it during the day, cracked in the corner. Grimy, probably hadn't been cleaned in 20 years. This time I caught a glimpse of movement, a flicker. I paused, then turned, and I looked. My reflection was standing there. Same clothes, same face, same flashlight. But it wasn't me. I was breathing heavy, my chest rising and falling. But my reflection was completely still. No breath, no blinking, just watching me. My grip on the flashlight tightened. I leaned slightly to the right. The reflection leaned too, but just a hair too slow, like it had to remember what to do. I whispered under my breath, "What the hell?" And then it smiled. I didn't. Its lips pulled back in this wide, stretched grin, teeth too white, too straight, like a bad imitation of human joy. And then its right hand slowly raised and waved at me. I froze. My hands were by my sides. That was the moment I understood whatever was inside that mirror. It wasn't a reflection. It was watching, learning. And then it did something I will never forget. It mouthed my name. No sound. Just a silent movement of lips. "Marco." That broke me. I stumbled back, knocking into a gurney behind me. The crash echoed down the hallway like gunfire. I ran. I don't remember grabbing my radio, or even closing the security office door behind me. I stayed awake until sunrise, staring at the flickering monitors, every screen washed in static. The next day, I tried to tell Harold about the mirror. He didn't look surprised. He just said, "That's the 3rd time someone's told me that." And none of them made it a full week. I asked what happened to them. He hesitated. They stopped casting reflections altogether. I laughed. I needed to believe it was a joke. But later that night, when I brushed my teeth in the locker room, the mirror didn't show me. It showed an empty hallway behind me, and something, just barely visible at the far end, moving closer with every blink. On my 4th night, I stopped sleeping altogether. I tried, God knows I tried. But every time I closed my eyes, I'd hear that voice. A whisper, a low mechanical hum, like a tape recorder looping something just out of reach. A message I wasn't supposed to fully understand, only feel. And what I felt was wrong. It started in the security room. Around 2:00 a.m., the cassette deck built into the wall console lit up on its own. The machine was ancient, probably hadn't worked in decades. But that night, it whirred to life with a soft click and began to play. At first, it was just static. Then behind the crackling noise, a voice emerged, a slow, distant murmur like it was buried under layers of dust and time. We begin again. We begin again. We begin again. The voice repeated the phrase every 12 seconds exactly. Flat. Emotionless. No background noise. No breathing. Just that phrase like a command stuck on a loop. I unplugged the machine. The voice kept playing. That's when I realized it wasn't coming from the cassette deck at all. It was playing from the overhead intercom speaker. I stared at the camera monitors. Feed number 6, covering the third-floor hallway, was flickering. A tall figure had appeared at the far end of the corridor. A man in a white coat, standing perfectly still, facing the camera. His head was tilted slightly to one side like he was studying the lens or looking through it. He wasn't blurry or ghostly, in fact, he looked too real, like he didn't belong in the grainy footage, hyper clear and out of place like a sticker on a faded page. I switched to the hallway cam. Nothing. Switched back. He was still there, closer now. My blood ran cold. I hit the emergency light system. All hallway lights flared up except on the 3rd floor. The feed turned black. Static. Then the intercom flared again. Marco. Return to observation. My knees buckled. That voice. It was my own. But not a recording. Not an echo. A perfect mimicry, like someone or something had learned how to speak like me. The man in the white coat never moved, never blinked, never broke eye contact, if he even had eyes. That night, I sat in the control room for hours, clutching my flashlight and the emergency phone that never worked. At 4:47 a.m., the power went out for exactly 13 seconds. When the lights returned, the monitors were normal. The tape recorder was off. But there was a new tape on my desk. No label. Just a strip of medical tape with my name written in smudged red ink. I haven't listened to it. I won't. Because some part of me already knows what's on it. The session. The one where I scream. The one that hasn't happened. Yet. The 5th night was when I stopped thinking I was guarding an abandoned hospital. And started wondering if I was the one being studied. It began with a filing cabinet. I was doing my usual patrol when I passed the medical records room near the east wing. The door, which was always locked, stood open. I didn't have the key. I never had. The lights were flickering inside, and the air smelled like rotting paper and rusted metal. I stepped in, cautiously sweeping my flashlight across the shelves. Hundreds of folders lined the walls, each coated in thick layers of dust. I reached for one marked P113. There was no name on the tab, just a number. I opened it. Inside were black and white photos of a man strapped to a medical bed. Electrodes taped to his head, eyes wide open, mouth mid-screen. Attached was a medical summary. Most of it was redacted, thick black lines crossing out diagnosis procedure, even the admission date. But one line was left untouched. Subject responded negatively to memory reset protocol. Session terminated. File incomplete. I set the folder down and pulled another. R224. A woman. Same setup. Same expression. This file had one eerie note. Subject failed to respond to verbal triggers. Memory shows signs of integration from past trial. Identity unstable. Page after page. File after file. No names. Just numbers. I couldn't find a single patient name in the entire room. And then I found one more folder, tucked behind a loose panel in the drawer. The label read M041. I opened it. My heart dropped. It was me. A photo of me standing at the front gate. My face. My uniform. Time-stamped June 3rd, 1963. But I was born in 1991. I flipped the page, EEG readings, psychological analysis, and the phrase, reintegration attempt unsuccessful. Subject unaware of previous cycle. I staggered back, heart racing. What did that mean? Reintegration cycle. The room suddenly felt too quiet, too aware. That's when I noticed the file cabinets weren't still anymore. The drawers were slowly opening on their own, one by one. Metal creaking, papers shuffling, like the hospital was breathing through them. I ran. But just before I reached the door, I heard something, a voice, a whisper. "You've been here before." I turned. No one was there, just the empty room, and every single folder, now lying open on the floor, all showing the same face, mine. There's a door in the hospital that shouldn't exist. It has no handle, no hinges on this side, no sign that it was ever meant to open. And yet, it does. Only when it rains. The first night I noticed it, the storm outside was biblical. Thunder cracking every few seconds, rain lashing against the building in sideways sheets. Most of the lights had gone out due to power surges, leaving the halls dim and humming with emergency red glow. I was doing my rounds near the sub-level stairwell, the part of the hospital no one ever mentioned. Even in the building schematics, it was just marked service level, sealed. But that night, I saw it. Tucked at the end of a narrow hallway I'd never walked down before, half obscured by a dangling light fixture, and a water-stained ceiling, was a steel door. No number, no handle, no keyhole. Just cold, weathered metal, and one word scratched deep into its surface. Remember. Rainwater pooled near the base. The concrete around the threshold was cracked as if something behind it had pushed out at some point. And the door was open. Just an inch. Just enough to see total darkness beyond it. I stood frozen for a long time. The air was colder here, sharper, and it didn't smell like mold or dust. It smelled sterile, bleached, like a laboratory. I raised my flashlight, hesitated, then stepped closer. As I approached, something moved across the beam of light inside. Not clearly, just the shape of a shoulder, maybe a hand retreating into the dark. Then I heard it. A sound like an old reel-to-reel tape starting up. And a voice, my voice, saying, "Begin sequence. Memory isolation active." I took a step back, heart hammering. Suddenly, the intercom above crackled to life with static, and through the distortion I heard screaming. Not distant, not faded. It was me. I was screaming. I turned and ran back down the hallway, the door slowly creaking open wider behind me like it knew I'd be back. The next morning I returned. The hallway was dry, the door was gone. Just a blank concrete wall. No seams, no scratch marks, nothing. But that night, the rain came again. And when I checked, the door was there again. Open. Wider this time. On the floor, soaked and smeared in mud, lay a hospital wristband. It had my name on it, and the date of admission, October 14th, 1963. That's the night the original hospital director vanished. His name was also Marco. I don't remember leaving the hospital. I remember trying to. I remember grabbing my bag, running down the hall, keys in hand, adrenaline burning through my body like fire. But after that, it's a blur. What I do remember is waking up in my apartment 3 days later, drenched in sweat, covered in mud. My boots were soaked, and there was a hospital wristband still on my wrist, one that read, "Marco. Admitted, October 14th, 1963. My phone had no missed calls, no texts. The date was normal. Nothing on the news. Just a quiet gray morning like any other. I told myself it was just a breakdown, that I'd imagined it all, that I'd snapped under the pressure of too many night shifts, too much isolation. But then things started to follow me. It began with the mirrors. Every time I looked into one, my reflection stared a moment too long, like it was waiting for something. Then one morning I passed by a store window and saw myself inside, standing still, watching me from the other side. I blinked, and it was gone. The recordings came next. My voicemail would occasionally play static messages. Sometimes, if I listened closely, I'd hear myself speaking, "Begin sequence. Memory reset protocol. Incomplete." But I never left a message. I started seeing the man in the white coat on subway platforms, in reflections of elevator doors, in the crowd always just far enough that no one else seemed to notice him. And then, the hospital started calling me, an unknown number, always at 3:13 a.m. I never picked up, until last week. I was exhausted, half awake. I answered the call and said nothing. On the other end, my own voice replied, "Marco, return to the lower level. Session incomplete. You were never discharged." The call ended. My phone died instantly. The next day I went back. I don't know why. I had to see if the hospital was still there. If anything I remembered had actually happened. When I arrived, the gates were chained shut. A demolition crew was parked out front. I asked one of the workers how long the building had been abandoned. He looked confused, then said, "This place been empty since, what, the 70s? No one's had keys to this thing for decades." I asked about the night guard, about Harold. He just shook his head. "Sir, there hasn't been a single employee assigned to this building since 1972. That night I returned home. I locked every door, every window, and still, at 3:13 a.m. the intercom in my apartment buzzed. 'Marco, return to observation.' My lights flickered. The hallway beyond my bedroom began to stretch longer than it should have been. And at the very end of it, I saw a door. Steel. No handle. The word 'remember' carved into it. It was open. Just an inch. I haven't moved since. Because the reflection in my television is smiling. And I'm not. I think I never left that hospital. I think I'm still inside. And maybe you are too. If you found this story valuable and interesting, please hit the like button. This really helps us bring you more good and valuable content. Leave a comment below and let us know what you think, what questions you have, or what topics you would like us to cover next. We love hearing from you. Of course, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our next stories. Thank you for taking the time to read my stories.